if you guys actually enjoy treating your customers like a pieces of shit, because that's how I felt when I went to the Alamo Draft House. Okay? You know what? I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to text in your little crappy-ass theater. It was too f***ing dark in that place for me to find my seat, alright? I was using my phone as a flashlight to get to my f***ing seat. So excuse me for using my phone in USA, United States of America, where you are free to text in a theater. I was not aware that I couldn't text in your theater, all right? I've texted in all the other theaters in Austin, and no one ever gave a fuck about what I was doing with my fucking phone, all right? And it was on silent. It wasn't on loud. It wasn't bothering anybody. You guys obviously were being assholes to me. And I'm sure that's what you do, you know, to rip people off. You take my money, and then you throw me out. You know, I will never be coming back to your Alamo Draft House or whatever. I'd rather go to a regular theater where people are actually polite. And, you know, I'm going to tell everyone about how you are. And I'm pretty sure you guys are being on purpose. So thanks for making me feel like a customer. Thanks for taking my money.
Prophecy streets have been calling me, rolling these dice, was crossing these blocks like Monopoly. This ain't no game though, they call it the game though. Industry playing so blatantly, but there is no stopping.
Phenom Radio is the home of the hottest indie music. Tune into the Phenom Radio Top 20 Countdown, Monday through Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Pacific.
A razor sharp pussy, raise your paws pussy, when the sun.
So many times I played the fool, man, he'll be low. I'm too fly to be sitting here lonely, feeling for the ride, wanna put it on me. Pittsburgh. When you get inside and when I grind it, I can't deny it, feels so exciting, deeper. Is no result.
A better job, a better home, a better life. Who hasn't wished for these things, worked for them, and sought a place where they had a better chance of becoming real? For generations, Brockton has welcomed those seeking something better. From those who came in search of opportunity to today's multicultural population that makes us the most diverse community in all of New England. Brockton is a place where homes are more affordable, communities closer, where a strong and talented workforce fuels the success of businesses big and small, and the vision of a more diverse and equitable America is being realized every day. It's where ideas take root, businesses grow, communities thrive, new beginnings unfold, and the promise of a better life is kept. Brockton, Massachusetts. where better begins.
Time to grow up. You got a problem with your self-esteem and ego. Oh, here we go again. It's time to grow up now. It's time to grow up. You got a problem with your self-esteem and ego. Oh, here we go again. It's time to grow up now.
This is Black C representing Green Life Music Group. You're now listening to The Booth on hoobazoo.com. Get with it with my homie Sinister. Get green.
It's caught in the crossfire.
Pippet! Pippet! Come on, Pippet! Pippet! Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
This is blasphemy. This is madness. This is the Booth.
It's your boy Sinister One broadcasting live from the City of Champions. You are watching The Booth. It is July 3rd, 2023. This year is flying along. A big thanks to my guest from last week, John C. Williams, who is running for Mayor of Brockton, Mayor Hopeful, Mayor of Brockton, John C. Williams. Big shout out to him for coming on the show. Got my sponsors, Michael Douglas, Barreto, MDB Electronics. Also got 494,000 streams. Vianna Marie, get on it. Download, follow her music. She just released a ton of singles and they're getting a ton of airplay. Tactical target systems. When you see me at the range, those are the targets that you see. What's up, Maddie C? I see you in the chat. Also, I Love Boston Sports. If you check out the show, you have a chance that you could possibly win an I Love Boston Sports t-shirt. And Viana Marie Empowerment Photography, Kimberly Ann, check her out, book your event. And before we get into the news booth, I've got my guys on here. First Tuesdays is usually when these guys come on. And this week we decided, since it is the 4th of July tomorrow, that we would either do the show Wednesday or Monday. We decided to come on Monday and do the show and hang out with you guys. But I'm going to let my guys introduce themselves. I'm going to start with my guy down in the bottom left-hand corner, which will be Ken Diesel.
Hi, everyone. Ken Diesel. Glad to be back. Happy early 4th. Hope you guys are staying cool and safe.
And Rob, who's now back up here. Rob, introduce yourself.
So great to be back in Massachusetts for Independence Day. Happy Independence Day, everybody. Go out, enjoy it, stay safe.
Rob, what was the first thing you got when you got, what? I got to ask Rob this. When you came up here, what was the first thing you said? Oh, I haven't been up here in so long. I got to get this to eat.
I don't really know. I don't know that there was any one thing. I mean, you can get anything you want anywhere these days. I don't know that there was something. I mean, in the old days it would have been Regina's Pizza, but I understand that's not really a thing anymore. So
usually people are like lobster rolls or something like that. They want to go to what's the crab place? The Baskin Crab or Legal Seafood. But Legal Seafood's another place that's also has kind of expanded out around the area too. So, it's usually one of those things. I know I'd like to get Rob back down here. We can go to Cape Cod Pizza. That was the last place we went to eat and had a good time, was Cape Cod Pizza. Always a good time. Before we get into our topics today, these guys are going to be on here that, we on the first Tuesday of every month, we like to talk politics. And we also like to talk legal stuff. And we've got some things today that we're definitely going to talk about in the legal booth and in the Biden bombshell, some stuff that went down last week. But before we get into the news booth, the first thing I have to say is the city of Brockton today is in memory of Bill Carpenter. As you guys know, 4 years ago today, we lost our mayor, Bill Carpenter, on this day. So my prayers and blessings go out to an entire city who lost a beloved guy. Me and Ken actually did WXBR, WBT radio with Mayor Carpenter before he was elected mayor. Bill Carpenter was a guy who pulled no punches and put people on call when he needed to put people on call on his radio show where we were at. So, our prayers and blessings go out to everybody in the city of Brockton and Bill Carpenter's family as we mourn the 4th year of his loss. If you guys weren't here on the show last week, a couple of weeks ago, I had a mayor hopeful. He was on the show, Hamilton Rodrigues. And I'm just going to bring up this here that we had actually had him call his treasurer, and the OCPF, which is the official campaign political finance organization, is where if you're running for office, you have to submit who your treasurer is and your money and where you're spending your money. It's available for the public to go look. He had announced that he had Thomas Datwyler as his finance campaign manager and another gentleman from a firm. And they confirmed it. But then last week, they have stepped down. And I'm going to let my guys explain what the OCPF is and why politicians need to use this and why is it so important? Because a lot of people don't know that there are things that are supposed to keep politicians honest. Either Rob or whichever one of you guys want to jump on that and explain what that is.
Well, the OCPF is the Office of Campaign Political Finance, and it's a state agency. Very careful. There's also a federal agency. We'll talk about the state agency. And that tracks both campaign donations and expenditures. And as someone who has been a campaign treasurer, trust me, it is the worst job in the world. I've done it. And every single dollar that comes into a campaign, regardless if it's from the candidate himself or herself or itself, or from donations, has got to be logged. The amount, the date it was given, the methodology was given, i.e. check, Venmo, cash, in-service, transaction, donation. And then you got to list all the money you expended. Like, for example, I'll give you an example. Let's say that we have a dance party to raise money for Sinister One. Sinister One's going to run for mayor of Brockton. Okay. And we hire Rob to be the DJ of this thing. So on the expenses, we had to write down Rob Resnick got paid X amount of dollars for DJing. You get the VFW, excuse me, X amount of dollars for the rental of a hall. You paid X amount of dollars for liquor and a one-day liquor fee. And you paid X amount of dollars for security, a detail, whatever. And you have to file those every month. And then you got to file quarterly reports. And then you got to file an annual report and then a year and a campaign end report. So every single dollar that brought in, every single dollar that is spent has got to be accounted for and what you did it for and why you did it for and show receipts. I am talking about if you go out and buy somebody a cup of coffee, or for example, give you an example, what tripped me up. We had a number of candidates, well, a couple of candidates I worked for, we'd have phone banking. And one of the things we'd always do is we'd order pizza in for the people making the phone calls and soda. We paid a couple of times. We just paid cash for it. I didn't get a receipt. My bad. I guesstimated. Got called on the carpet. Like, well, how much money did you spend on the pizza? I said, well, about this much. Said, don't you have any receipts? No, we paid in cash. Trust me, over pizza. So when I talk every single dollar, I mean every single goddamn dollar.
And Rob was telling you, I heard Rob say, be careful. What were you chiming in there for on that one? Is there a difference between federal and...
No, I didn't say anything, but I would add one thing. I mean, I think there's a lot of proper purpose behind the regulation, state and federal, because obviously money involved in politics can, it can allow a candidate to operate, but also you're raising money from people and you want to know that the money's being spent properly as opposed to being stolen or misappropriated. The only thing that's ironic about all this is we do such a good job, or we try to anyway, of regulating expenditures that we forget that there's really an open season on accepting all kinds of money from all kinds of people without limit these days, Citizens United and what have you. And so, it becomes problematic because here we're trying to regulate everything, but then you can raise tons of money from dark money, unreported sources. And so it almost defeats the whole purpose of what Ken explained, which is, I think it's important to do it, but, you could take in all kinds of money from unreported sources. And it just, to me, it defeats the purpose.
Well, one of the things you did mention, we're having that problem now with the colleges here in Harvard, MIT, where politicians are being named for buildings, and that money, I don't know if you're familiar and heard about this was going on, but now they're starting to look into this. They're starting to say that people getting wings of hospitals and things of that sort being nominated is a violation of what you're talking about, what you guys are talking about. And it's, it's something we definitely have to keep an eye on. But yes, they have stepped down. They have resigned as of last Wednesday, which led to a tirade, which can be seen on my Facebook page. Again, as you guys saw, I'm not going to get into it with this. My rebuttal for this has been hashtag no vote Rodrigues, and I'm going to stick with that. But again, it can all be seen. Also in the news booth, any men who have wives who frequent the Christmas tree shops, stay away. It's been announced beginning this Friday, Christmas tree shops we knew it was going out of business, but the liquidation sales begin this Friday. Men, if you've seen the movie Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome, 2 men enter, 1 man leaves, as Ken would say. This is going to be that version for women. So, men, stay away from Christmas tree shops beginning as of Friday. In the legal booth, we discussed this show. I think I discussed this show with you guys. We had a story here. It was a legal story where this gentleman who we now know as Paul Little. Paul Little went into a store, bought a couple of Mass Millions tickets, and forgot the tickets and left the tickets in the register. Come to find out, the cashier took the tickets, and then the tickets ended up winning. So the cashier conspired this thing where her and the store owner was going to collect the ticket money and split it. Well, they got caught because they got into an argument in the lobby of the lottery. So when they got into this argument, the lottery went back, they checked the cameras, and they found that this guy left his tickets in the register. which started this whole legal debate if the cashier has a legal obligation to make sure that person got those tickets or not. One of the reasons why this went down is because of the argument. The question here is does this guy, because the lottery has now paid this guy his money. He's gotten his $3 million from the lottery. And I believe there's now going to be a precedent set. Does a cashier have legal obligation if you leave something behind at the register that you pay for?
Well, yes. If you own, here's the thing. If you buy some property, and that's what a lottery ticket is, it's property, from a seller, and you forget it, yes, the seller has an affirmative obligation to, put it in escrow or secure it or do something like that because it's no longer his or her property. And also, by the way, there's a little known regulation. I ran into this because I actually had a case on this. I actually defended some people that there's a little known mass lottery regulation that does not allow employees or owners of stores where lottery tickets are sold to redeem a lottery ticket that's sold in their store. They can't do that.
Now
the reason this happened, I'll tell you why. This
is why.
well, no, this was even worse. There was, for a while, you can't do it now, but there was a way to determine what lottery tickets were winners by scanning them. The safety protocol. And what they were doing, this gang was doing, is they were scanning the lottery tickets, trying which ones were winners. Couldn't tell you what it won, but this was a winner, and they would sell them to their friends, and then they would redeem them. So that's interesting. Yeah, if you buy a piece of property, I don't care if you buy some. Let's say, you go buy a car or you buy some stereo equipment. Yeah, if you walk out without it, the owner of the shop can't take it and sell it again. No, it's no longer his property. It's your property. Now, maybe he could charge you a rental fee or something like that for taking up space in his shop, but that's about it. Yeah, you have an affirmative obligation to ensure that at least he leaves your property with the property.
Okay, so there is a legal. Rob, you want to add on that, or you good?
No, that's fine.
Good. So, as I said, this guy has been given the $3 million, and they've charged this woman. They've actually charged this woman with theft and conspiracy.
Yeah.
Conspiracy.
You are stealing someone else's property.
So, but the conspiracy federal offense is the tax evasion, right? Because she was trying to cash the ticket with someone else trying to cash it, so she can avoid paying taxes. I guess that's a federal offense, right?
Well, yes and no. I don't think they're avoiding the taxes because the tax would be paid on whoever cashed in the tickets got to pay the taxes. The taxes would be paid. I think it's the conspiracy to defraud. Basically, he didn't own the ticket.
Gotcha. Well, he's going to get his $3 million. Also here in Brockton, and I'm not sure, Ken's not here in Brockton anymore. We used to get a little bit of inside info, but as you guys know, the ex-Brockton police chief who had the car accident, he crashed in.
That's great. That's freaking great. Trust me. Everybody's heard this story. Every bar in Massachusetts has heard this story. Are you kidding me?
I'll let you speak on it. Hold on. For those who don't remember, Chief Gomes Chief Gomes in his cruiser went off the road in Avon. He smashed into two cars. When this happened, the state police showed up. The state police did not find him of any problems or any issues. He was not given the sobriety, nothing. So they let him walk. Now there's this whole issue where it's become a big news story because they're saying they tried to cover it up. I guess when a cruiser is destroyed or totaled, it's supposed to be reported publicly, which it wasn't. The judge right now is trying to charge Mr. Gomes with negligence in this accident. He's trying to have this thrown out because he was never charged with anything the night of. And let's be all honest here. He was the chief of police. The state police rolled up. I'm pretty sure they knew who he was. And I hate to say this. I see a lot of people talking about this is a city official problem, this and that. And I feel like, no, it's a thin blue line problem. It's about the thin blue line and protecting your own, in my opinion. And I feel like because the state police didn't charge him with anything, you really have no legal grounds to charge him with anything now after he wasn't charged with anything from the get-go. I get it. It sucks that he hit 2 people and one lady, she's messed up. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ken.
Let me explain to you.
It's a hot case right now.
Okay. So let me explain to you why everyone's so pissed off. There is a statute out there, and there's also something called CMR, Code of Massachusetts Regulations, that says if you are a command police officer, which means you hold the rank of captain or above, in any police force in Massachusetts, and here's key word, you are involved in any type of accident with a motor vehicle that's owned by the city or an official motor vehicle, it automatically triggers certain protocols. The AG's office has got to be notified. A special investigative unit from the state police has to be notified, and they've got to conduct the investigation. That didn't happen. That's the cover.
So this really isn't at the city level, right? This is at the state level,
is the state
right?
level.
That's what I thought.
This is a thin blue line, but this is the problem. The problem is, it may have been the fact that there was no negligence, he lost control of the vehicle, and they may have fined. Everyone has said, okay, it's regrettable. The city will cover the insurance cost. The problem is, the old joke, it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. It's the cover-up. Because he's also required to report it to his own police department and to the city. He didn't do that. I'm very careful I'm talking about. If he'd been driving his own vehicle, his own private vehicle, none of those regulations kick in. It's only because he was driving
he was in the cruiser, correct.
Right. That's the reason.
And I'm sure, Rob, you're familiar with stuff like this because I'm sure the military has almost the same thing, right? If you're a person that's a general or something, you get in an accident off base, but you're in a government vehicle, right? It's almost kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it would apply to 100% of people, not by position or rank. If
really?
If you're using an official vehicle, then there's the entire process that kicks in, and investigations and findings, and
wow. So Jesus. So it's even worse if you're in the military. So when you see these guys hauling, with the first of the month, you used to see the guy. And what's funny is you don't see that no more. Whatever happened to that? You used to see the guys the first of every month hauling equipment for the weekend stuff on the holiday. You don't see that no more. That's the weird thing. Wow. So, Ken, thank you very much, because I saw the story, and I know right now it's a hot story here.
Well, that's the whole thing. It's been going on. Every bar, like I said, every bar in Massachusetts knows about this, because this has been a whole thing, because they're really talking about who else is responsible. Can the troopers on scene be charged criminally? Can their superiors be charged criminally?
Oh shit! I didn't know it was that. I didn't know it was like that.
No, this has sent shockwaves to everyone, because again, it deals because he was driving a city-owned vehicle.
Yeah, it was totaled.
That's the problem. Because it wasn't his vehicle; it was the city's own vehicle. And the other question is, why was he driving a city-owned vehicle when he was off duty?
He was going home. I believe that's what it was. Yeah, he was going home.
That's the question: is he allowed to use it for his own private thing? So the home has other issues that deal with insurance and wear and tear and stuff like that. So trust me.
And you know what? And in all fairness, being devil's advocate, this is where I hate certain perks for certain people. And we saw this at the MBTA when you were high up. You were given a company car, right? Right. Everybody knew that you weren't supposed to take a company car home, but the perk was that when everything was fine and nothing was going on, guess what? You took the company car home. But then one guy gets in an accident, and then guess what? You're supposed to be filing your excise taxes. A lot of people don't realize when you have. Yeah. So all this stuff comes up when things like this happen.
That's exactly that's what they're looking at. They're looking at, again, I don't know what the regulation is regarding the chief of police and using that car off duty. Every town has their own regulations. I'm thinking begin to go. I haven't gone, but that's the freaking problem. That's what's throwing everyone off.
Okay.
And the other thing is, they're also that they didn't breathalyze her, they didn't field sobriety test him, which they should have done. But if he wasn't drunk, then they can simply say, "Hey, we heard the breathalyzer, and he was 0.0," and that would have killed all the rumors right then and there.
And moving on, we were actually discussing this in our chat within ourselves, and we're going to get into the hypocrisy of this whole thing. But SCOTUS was busy this week, as Ken and Rob are here. As you see up behind Rob, we the people behind Rob, as we're heading into this July 4th. And as we head into this July 4th, SCOTUS has come and has struck down 2 major pieces of arguments and debates that have been up there on this Hill. One of the things that was stricken down was Biden's debt forgiveness program. The Supreme Court struck that down. And as you can see in my picture, the 6 people who voted against it, the 3 people who were, didn't want to, the dissidents, they call them. And then shortly after, days after striking down this debt forgiveness program, they struck down affirmative action at 3 major colleges. And again, it's the same 6 people. The problem here is that you have a guy in Justice Clarence Thomas who is part of this, I gotta let Rob and these guys get into this. It's the hypocrisy of this whole thing. Justice Thomas wrote a whole piece afterwards, trying to explain his reasons why he voted out the affirmative action. And it was kind of BS. And he said that his Yale diploma was tainted and was only worth 15 cents because he got through Yale on affirmative action. The hypocrisy of this is that if it wasn't for affirmative action put into place in 1964 for colleges, Clarence Thomas would not have been in Yale. And I'm going to let Rob get into, because these are the type of things that Rob writes about over there at the corridor. I'm going to let you speak on the hypocrisy of this. And the other hypocrisy of this also is if the playing field was level for kids of color or minorities, not just blacks, we're talking Asians, we're talking minorities, then why, and Rob talked about this on the show, then why did his nephew get paid $6,000 a month to attend a private school from his white elitist friend? Rob, you mentioned that on this show. You brought that up. Let's talk about this hypocrisy. If the playing field is so level, go ahead. I'm going to let you get into this hypocrisy of this whole thing.
Well, the thing is we're combining different issues, and they're all important, but they don't necessarily go together. And so the caveat that I would start this conversation with, and people who listen to the show would know this to be true, or after years of talking about these things, obviously I am personally and legally against any form of discrimination. I think that is, one of the evils in society, and the system needs to do a better job in that regard. And I also would agree with some of the people who have been writing and talking about the opinions and some of the justices who have been involved in these decisions, and whether or not those particular justices, all or some of the 6, have ulterior motives, or whether or not they're even being true to the legal words that they're writing. And so that's a more complicated issue. I think that's perhaps for another time, but I caveat that because I think that regardless of the words that they wrote, regardless of the legal opinions, some of which are actually fairly sound, I think that that's not really what they were after. I think there was a more ideological motive going on. And so even though their words on paper don't say certain things, I agree with some of the people who have offered commentary on these opinions that there was more to it, that there was more personal ideology and other issues at stake behind the opinions. Because if you read them, and I know Ken has read them, and many people have read them in part or what have you, you can't just listen to what the TV commentators say, because they're doing it in 30 seconds. They're talking about one main point in an argument, in an opinion that's 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 pages. Right. So if you want to talk about it, if you want to know what the justice has said, you have to read it. And that's all the opinions that are part of these things. So that's my caveat, that I think that they had motivation of ideology more so than law in some of these analysis. And obviously I'm disappointed in the outcome, in the sense that I oppose discrimination. I think that, and I'm very involved in college admissions, as you guys know. I work, for my alma mater. And I chair a committee on the Board of Trustees that oversees admissions. So I've been dealing with this issue for many, many years, and we've been leaning forward, anticipating what these opinions would say. So this is something I've been thinking about and working in for a while. It makes sense to me that race is an important criteria, but one criteria of many that colleges can look at. They're looking at the total applicant. You're looking at your grades, your academics, where you went to high school, your co-curriculars, your athletics, your finances. There are a lot of things. I mean, anybody who themselves applied to school or their children have applied to school or family members have applied to school, you know that the applications and the process involve many different things. Race has traditionally been one of those things, and I see no reason why that should have changed. I think there is a place for it. It is not the only issue. It is not the dominant issue. It is not the deciding issue, but it is part of the analysis of the applicants, and it works in the sense of you're looking at people, their life experiences, their academic performance, their co-curricular performance. This is all part of the formula. And if you talk to admissions teams at colleges and universities across the country, they will all tell you how the system works, and it works fairly similarly. And you know, so yes, you have individuals who feel that because they personally felt that their academic qualifications were stronger on paper, and some of those admitted because of racial considerations or socioeconomic considerations, they felt that they were denied entry when they otherwise would have, because their academics were stronger than some of the people that were admitted. That's the argument that they made. And, you know, to some extent that may be true. I mean, they used to say that some of the schools would be, you know, predominantly Asian American, if schools didn't, you know, somehow look at how to balance those numbers, because you're talking about people who have, you know, who perform much more strongly academically. So there are a lot of different issues. There are certainly people who maybe didn't get into their first choice school or their top couple of choice schools because you know, that there were, that in their mind, racial preference being given. But again, that's only one factor of many. There are other ways to get in and other ways to be qualified. And, you know, the real issue is, and this is what I go to. If you read the, and I'm going to be controversial here, guys. If you read the opinions, they're not that awful. Okay, the crux of the opinion is true to the law, is true to the Constitution. Remember, the Constitution does not tell us how and what to do. It sets up standards and limits and, you know, things that we talk about on the show. It's not a how-to guide. It places limits on the authority of the government. And so, you know, yes, it is a shame that we are not colorblind in admissions, right? But the problem is not the affirmative action program. The problem is not that colleges are considering race as one of 20 factors that they look at. The problem is that even though we started, you know, the civil rights, Brown versus the Board of Education in the 1950s, the civil rights movement of the 1960s, the abandonment of the separate but equal doctrine, and the idea is that even though that's been going on for over 60 years, we as a society, and there are places that are far more sinister in this than others, we as a society still allow school systems in communities of color or underprivileged or socioeconomic challenged communities to be a disgrace. That children coming out of those schools, see, this is the reason that this opinion is a problem. Children graduating from those school systems are at a disadvantage, not because they aren't smart, not because they aren't willing to do the work. They are at a disadvantage because their school systems are under-resourced. Their teachers are not paid properly. They're not given proper textbooks. They're not given proper resources that other school systems have. I'm lucky. Ken was lucky. We went to school systems that were resourced properly, and we did well in school. We were able to get into good colleges and law school and what have you. And I feel very fortunate that I went to a school system that did that for me, you know, at tax dollars, with tax dollars. I didn't go to private schools. But the problem is that while there are school systems that we benefit from, there are plenty of school systems, including in Massachusetts, which does a very good job with public education. You know, you want to talk about a state like Mississippi, go look at Mississippi, that for 60, 70 years, in fact, every year since the Civil War, they intentionally provide shitty education and lack of resources to their people to keep them stupid. Right, to keep them stupid and complacent. That's the way Mississippi works, and Alabama and other. I lived there. I mean, I know this. And that's a more problem. So the issue is, what do you do for those students, right? How do they get a fighting chance? How do they have a chance to go to any college? I'm not talking about Harvard. I'm talking about any decent school. They do the work and they have the ability, but they were denied the same public education opportunities that we had. And that's why these schools were considering race, because they were trying to come up with a way to balance that, to make up for that, to give them that chance, not to give them something they didn't earn, not to put people in school where they didn't have a chance to succeed, to find students that could succeed and demonstrated the capacity to succeed and the drive to succeed, and were going to dedicate themselves to it. And I work with those students in school and I see how well they did. And most of the time schools get it right. There, you can point to some where they didn't make it. That's always true. And you could have someone who was the valedictorian of the high school class that flunks out of college. It happens for different reasons. But the point is that this is not about affirmative action, and it's not about the equal protection clause, and it's not about whether or not it's lawful to consider race. The problem is, what do we do about the fact that for generations and generations and generations, we as a society have allowed shitty, excuse my language, shitty school systems to hurt these kids and their families and deny them futures. That's what this case is about.
And your thoughts on this other thing with kind of the hypocriticalness of Justice Clarence Thomas, who you've been very vocal about, the fact that, I mean,
that's a different issue, right? Clarence Thomas's corruption is outrageous. It's the worst in the history of the Supreme Court, maybe in the history of the federal judiciary. He is openly on the take. He takes, we all saw the news articles that we talked about on the show, the millions of dollars, in free vacations and yacht rides and plane rides and, tuition being paid for what was effectively his kid. It was his nephew, but he was raising it. He and his wife were raising the kid as their own. So it's their kid, getting private school tuition being paid for by a donor. These aren't just by people who want to do something nice. These are by political activists. These are donors. And by the way, his wife is a notorious political activist. These are not just people who happen to say, hey, we kind of like Clarence Thomas and the way he thinks on the court. No, these were people who were actively buying him, buying his vote, and doing business, political activist business with his wife. And his wife belongs in a prison cell, by the way. And maybe that day will come. But again, that topic, I don't want to get on a distraction. These opinions that were handed down are not about corruption. There may have been intellectually corrupt in people, writing what on paper look like reasonable constitutional interpretations. It's not my philosophy, but I respect that there are different philosophies out there. On paper, they looked right. That's not what they were doing. You could write something innocuous on paper, but you have a sinister motive in doing it. That's what I think was going on here.
And Kenshi Brown, she called them out. They've been going back and forth. He wrote a rebuttal to her. Ken, I know you also on this show were very vocal about Judge Clarence Thomas, who people forget. The reason why we know about Judge Clarence Thomas is because he's the guy that brought sexual harassment in the workplace to the forefront. Pubic hair on the Coke can,
Yeah,
so
absolutely. We can discuss that another day. That's
yes,
a whole different
exactly.
show. And for example, there was actually in the University of Virginia Law Review, when he was nominated, one of the law professors, and you understand the University of Virginia is not a particularly liberal organization. An open letter to, at that time, nominee Clarence Thomas said he should recuse himself and not seek an appointment to the court because he deemed he wasn't qualified. But that's an issue for another day. But let's talk about this decision. I respectfully must disagree with Rob. I read the decision, and I think it's intellectually bankrupt. Let's do a quick history of affirmative action. Race-based quota admissions, which means is colleges said we're going to set aside a certain amount of places for people of color and other ethnic and religious minorities, has been outlawed since the early 70s. Be very clear about that. Okay? During the Burger Court. What this decision said was it went to universities who are both public and private and said, we're going to tell you what you can and cannot consider for admission. And we're not going to go through and say everybody's got to be blind to everything, like donations or athletic ability or alumni status or anything. we're just going to pick on one thing and simply say, you can no longer consider race as our criteria for admission. This is where the intellectual hypocrisy comes in. All these conservative justices always keep saying how the government should stay out of the private sector. Why in God's green purple earth are you telling universities how they can admit students? As Rob said, this was a factor, not the overriding concern. We were not admitting people who are unqualified to attend the university. Rob, I think, will back me up. He's had more direct involvement. Mine's been more on the periphery. There are oftentimes more qualified students. People, what I mean, and I define qualified as this: if you let that individual in, absent any major catastrophe, that individual, after 4 or 5 or 6 years, depending on the program, would matriculate with a degree. That's what I mean by qualified. There are oftentimes more qualified applicants than there are spots available. So how do we whittle that down? Well, you look at the extraneous factors, extracurricular activities, recommendations. Are they alumni? Are they filling a niche? I'm not going to lie to you. When my nephews were applying to college, I upped my donations to my alumni school, University of Vermont, because I wanted them to check on the application, because it says on the application, are you related to an alumni? And if so, what is your relationship? Mother, father, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, grandfather, etc. And if you don't think that thing makes a difference to institutions, you're incredibly naive. There was a joke when I attended BU with my graduate law program that the way you got into BU's law school was to have someone donate a library, a wing, whatever. Okay? So this idea that we're totally blind when it comes to college admission is utter and complete nonsense. That is totally untrue. The reason you want a diverse student population is you want different ideas coming in. You want people to be interacting with different people from different backgrounds. And I'll give you, Sister One, let's use Brockton as a prime example, because I think this is something close to your heart. In Brockton, we have something called the SOS program, which stands for Save Our Sports. Because I don't know how many years ago, but Brockton zeroed out all the money for extracurricular athletic activities. So what the Brockton community did is got together and said, hey, we understand the Brockton school system doesn't have money for sports, and they've got other things to do. So we'll raise money privately to pay for athletic activities. Okay, and they've done that for a number of years. And they've done it very successfully. Melrose, the town I live in, has never had that problem. We have great athletic teams here in Melrose. Ironically, our women's athletic team does better on a whole than the men's. Now, granted, the men's football team gets all the glory, but if you're looking at actual awards, the women's athletic teams have won more titles than the men's athletic teams. Issue for another day. But if you're looking at Melrose, which has very strong extracurricular activities for athletics, academics, robotics, we even have, I didn't realize this, but do you realize there's a competitive chess teams out there?
Oh, yeah, you get scholarships. Yeah, you get scholarships for chess to go to college.
I never realized this. Apparently, chess competition is big. I never realized this. But anyway, I know this because the Melrose co-ed chess team went to nationals last year. And they finished overall 3rd in the country. And there was accusations of cheating, but that's an issue for another day. Now, you take that, a school that can produce, a nationally ranked chess player or a nationally ranked field lacrosse player or a nationally ranked debater versus someone from, let's take Roxbury, who doesn't have that kind of resources. Now, that individual may academically may be exactly the same. If you got two students, both with the exact same GPA, taking the exact same classes, so I'm not going to say someone got scathed through by taking rocks for jocks or something, but let's say the exact same recommendations, and one guy, I'll make them men for this purposes, or identifying as male, is a varsity soccer player and was active in the dramatics club and was a sports editor on the newspaper, versus a guy who just has the academics, who are you going to choose? You're going to choose the person with extracurricular activities. Right? because that shows a lot more discipline, even though that school may not have offered that. So that's just sheer hypocrisy. As for Clarence Thomas, if Clarence Thomas is so objectionable about affirmative action, then why don't he surrender his law degree, surrender his degrees, and resign from the Supreme Court, because clearly he's not qualified.
Yeah, and obviously it'd be great to see Clarence Thomas leave, but Ken makes good points, and what I'd like to add to that is this: in the opinion, or at least in one of the concurring opinions, Chief Justice Roberts writes that they're not saying that people can't talk about race. They're saying that colleges can't use it as an official criteria. Now, you may say they're mincing words, that they're being disingenuous. This goes back to the caveat that I offered, that I think that there's something more sinister going on than the actual words, that the words don't bother me as much as the motivation and what they intended to do. Because you can have people out there, people who run for president like Ron DeSantis, or what do we say? Is it DeSantis now? However he wants to call it. We like to call it DeSantis, D-U-H. But DeSantis is running. This is what he does in Florida. He would like to have no blacks in college, right? He would like to get rid of that, right? So when you look at people who say you can't consider race and you can't, then what his motivation is, and he doesn't even hide it, quite frankly, is to do away with blacks in higher education, make it all the whites get higher education, whatever's left can go to people of color. I mean, that's Ron DeSantis's world. And now the Supreme Court didn't quite go that far, but that's the sinister motivation that concerns me about where some of them were coming from. What's interesting, though, about what Chief Justice Roberts wrote, and again, I don't want to geek out legally here. Ken and I get off on this stuff, but everybody else is going to get credit.
No, go ahead.
But the issue that I want to write is, Justice Roberts' own words said, whether he means this or not, he put it in the opinion. And what he said was, we're not saying that applicants can't talk about race and the impact that it's had on them. And so if you talk to anybody in high school that's applying to college, what's the first thing, if not the only thing, you tell them? Write a damn good essay, right?
Absolutely.
Because you can't, at that point, your grades are your grades, your co-curriculars, everything's predetermined. The only thing you could really do right now is write a damn good essay. And what the Supreme Court opinion says is students who come from racial background, socioeconomic background, all that is fair game. And if your life experience based on your race, based on your gender, based on your sexual orientation, based on your socioeconomic status, all those different things, if that explains who you are and how you overcame those challenges, and that makes your application, then you can do that, and colleges can use that to admit you. So they almost took a step back. Now, how realistic is that? I would tell you that college admissions officers are going to look for that in a big way. And college admissions guidance counselors and those private services will be telling students, especially communities of color and socioeconomic communities, will be telling you, write that in your story. Talk about those challenges, how growing up in South Boston as a black man or a black woman or a transgender person, or whatever it is that you want them to know about you, you can write it in your essay, and college admissions officers are looking for it. That's how they're going to work this. I know it for a fact. And now, is it going to be enough? We'll see. Maybe not. Like I told you up front, my caveat was, I think colleges should be allowed to consider race. It doesn't mean that I think the opinion is bogus, and I do believe that it has sinister purposes behind it, not quite to the extent of Ron DeSantis, but similarly. But the fact of the matter is, applicants who take the time to write their essay can still raise those issues, and I guarantee you college admissions officers are looking for it. So, well, let's see what happens. I'm interested to see how this plays out. It's not going to be perfect, but I'm interested.
Well, if I may say, I agree with what Rob said 110%. There's no question about it that every college advisor I've ever met, spoken to, and my mother was a college advisor. She had a small business, and she would always say, would always probe her students' life stories, and they wouldn't realize what goldmine they had. For example, she had one student whose father was killed. He was killed in combat. This was the Gulf War I. He was regrettably, he was an A-10 pilot who got shot down, and the Iraqis found him, and let's just say they treated him very unpleasantly. and then her mother remarried and to another Air Force officer, and had some issues, guilt and other thing, incorporating. She also had younger half siblings. He felt a little unloved because she wasn't a pure, you know. And my mother said, "Put that in an essay." She said, "Why? No one cares." Trust me, that is tear jerking stuff to talk about the costs of war. We talk about the costs of war and the impact on families from a theoretical stance. This woman actually lived it. Now, granted, we're talking, this woman's, by the way, married, has kids of her own now. Gotta say, my mother passed away 17 years ago. So this is how long ago we're talking about. So, yes, but here's the problem. If you read the decision carefully, and I've read it 4 times, I'm reading another time, it's very clear that colleges cannot consider that as a factor. You can talk about all you want, but you can't consider that as a factor. And if someone finds out you're considering it, they can hold the university liable. So that's really, putting a damper on it. Again, I'm going back to this idea that, all these Republicans talk about getting government off our backs and letting the private sector do what it wants, unless it runs afoul of one of their own bigoted beliefs, then government should come in there and protect that. And that's ridiculous. And also they're talking about how college admissions should be blind. It's only about the character and the potential for success of the candidate. Okay, fine. If you want to do that, then they should be sending in without names, which means you're not going to know if this person's an alumni. You're not going to know if daddy or mommy gave money. You're not going to know the school system they came from. All you're going to know is GPA, recommendations, and SAT, and trust me, don't get me started on SATs or ACT. That's a whole different show.
Nobody does those anymore.
Yeah. But if you want to do that, then fine, do that. When you do that, then come back and talk to me how you can't talk about race. Until you do that, you're a goddamn hypocrite, and you're a liar.
And that's the thing, right? That the nefarious intent behind this was to deny application to people who come from a disadvantaged community. That's what they were getting at with this. It wasn't about a constitutional interpretation. That's why I'm saying I don't think the interpretation is outrageous. I think the motivation behind it is clearly outrageous and nefarious. And I think that if they really cared about that, then the way to fix this problem is to fix the school systems so that you don't need this type of consideration. Fix the school systems. That takes care of this all. Then you don't even have to worry about this issue anymore. And that's the hypocrisy, that they don't give a crap about the bad schools.
And I've talked about this.
Do that because that requires giving money.
I get it.
Exactly you said about Mississippi. What's the old joke? What's the old joke about Arkansas? Thank God for Mississippi.
Yeah, and I've talked about this in interviews on other shows. When people interview me, I talk about when I grew up. I grew up in Mission Hill, Boston, which was one of the lowest of the lows in income. But because I was so smart and I got double promoted, I was one of the first kids to be bused while they were shipping all these other black kids to South Boston, which was still blue collar white people, which were the same level. I was shipped off to Brighton, Mass, Newton, in that area for school, where I wasn't just black, I was also below that income level. But the schooling that I got in Brighton, Mass versus what I was getting in Roxbury was, and that was why they picked me for the program and sent me.
We talk about interesting personal stories. And oh, by the way, I'm going to go all legal geek on you, Sinister One. It wasn't busing. It was court-ordered desegregation. Sorry,
well, I think we were part of that METCO program. I think that's what it was, because it was only like five of us were black kids. It was only 5 of us, and I remember it was a police escort, military escort, because they threw shit at our buses. It was horrible. I remember it till this day.
Talk about an incredible life story. How would you like to be applying to colleges and saying, you've read about the court-ordered desegregation in Boston. You've read about the people throwing rocks at buses and using a flagpole to stab someone. I lived it. I was there. I was on bus number 15 going to Brighton. Think about how many admissions counselors would be going, whoa, look at that.
Right. And that's how it works.
Crazy stuff. Good conversation, guys. We spent a little bit of time on that one. I wasn't expecting that one. In the entertainment booth, rest in peace, WWE's Darren Drozdov, who was known as Droz. If you guys remember in 1999, if you were watching WWE, this guy was going up the ladder. He was going to be the next big star, and then it was a botched somersault flip, and he ended up paralyzed. Darren Drozdov passed away. He's actually lucky to have lived to 54. His paralyzation was so bad, it caused a lot of other issues with his health, but rest in peace to Darren Drozdov. Stitcher has announced as of August 23rd, they're gone. 2023, Stitcher is gone. That is one of the top podcasting sites out there, and I've mentioned on this show, Apple and Spotify are buying up the podcast sites left and right. Google is doing podcasting, and then Amazon is now in podcasting, but only for commerce type podcasts. So they're buying up all the smaller sites. If you're trying to look to get your podcast somewhere, you got to get it on Spotify or Apple, because they're going to get snatched up. Stitcher was one of the biggest under XM, Sirius XM, and they're gone. Marvel Studios started shooting scenes for Deadpool 3 a few months ago. The word is Channing Tatum has shot his scenes. He is playing Gambit. And people are kind of worried. Viana Marie especially is worried that Gambit might not be able to pull off the Cajun accent. Well, with all the AI filters and things out there right now, I wouldn't be surprised if they come up with an AI filter to put that Cajun accent into his language. Ryan Mallett, rest in peace, Patriots quarterback. He drowned last week in Florida off the coast of the Panhandle. I forget the exact county it was in. Begins with an O. But the sheriff of that county has come out and says there were no riptides. They went back, but there had been a warning not to swim in that area because the currents are just so bad. And just Rob, real quick, touch base on this kind of, they give these warnings. You're supposed to pay attention to these warnings, correct? You're not. They're there for a reason.
It's not necessarily easy, and if you're in a party mentality and you're not paying attention, you're going to make a tragic mistake, or you certainly could make a tragic mistake, which may have been the case here. What happens in Florida is when you watch your nightly news, well, morning, afternoon, nightly, whatever time it comes on, and they do the weather report. In Florida, every weather report includes a current report. And so they talk about, because the ocean is always swimmably warm. You don't have to worry about ocean temps. Like up here, you got to figure out when can you actually step into the ocean here. But down in Florida, you can always go in the ocean. So the only thing that not the only thing, but the main thing they talk about, and I'm telling you, this is in every weather report, is the current report. And so is there a low, medium, or high risk of a riptide? Because they're not permanent. They come and go. And so it's a whole geological thing. We don't need to get into it, but they come and go. It's not like they're just there and everybody knows it and you just stay away. They appear and then they dissipate. And so if you're going to a particular beach and maybe you saw it on the news, or maybe you didn't see the news, you can go to every town or county where they have the beach report, and it gives you which beaches have the high risk or low risk or whatever the case may be for rip currents. They also give you instructions if you find yourself in a rip current, what to do so that you don't drown. And of course, it's not foolproof, but these are proven things you can do. And so, look, the information is out there for people. If you live in Florida, you're used to it. You know what it is. You probably have thought about what to do if it happens to you, what to look for. There are visual signs of a riptide, the way the surf comes in and the other issues. So, but if you're inexperienced, if you're a tourist and you've been drinking or you're partying, and you're just having a good time and you're not really paying attention, you could get caught in a rip current. And what happens is people panic. And when you panic, you do the wrong thing and you start to fight against it. And that means you get tired and you drown. And so my guess is that's probably what happened here. Maybe they had alcohol. That seems to be the suspicion. But whether they did or not, they didn't handle the rip current properly. It was a strong one. And, I don't understand where they say that, the police said that there wasn't one. They don't know that for a fact. Give me a break. Maybe the forecast was for a low risk. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Even if it was a high risk, I've got into high risk areas where you look for it, you don't see one, you're fine. So it doesn't mean it's there. It just, you have to be careful. So I'm sorry. This is a tragedy. It shouldn't happen. But if you live in Florida, you hear about people getting caught up in these things. Sometimes they're good stories where they know what to do and somebody goes out and helps. Other times you get a tragic ending, which seems to be the case here.
And then another story down there in Florida, quick one. There was a guy, I just saw this, came across my time. There's a guy charged with a crocodile or alligator. He went viral down in Florida. He did when they take the beer and punch a hole in the beer and they shoot the beer in one shot?
Yeah, it's called shotgunning.
He shotgunned with the crocodile or alligator in Florida, and I guess that's a crime.
What do you mean he shotgunned? He
did the shotgun, and then he did it, yes. And I guess he's being arrested. I got to get the story, but I guess it's a crime.
What did he do to the alligator?
He gave the alligator a shotgun. Alcohol, and he's being arrested.
The alligator drank the beer?
Yeah, I guess so.
So that's abuse of an animal. Alligators.
Yeah, well, no, you can't feed.
It is real. Get out.
Feed alligators. Yeah, right. No, you can't feed alligators.
You can't feed them. You can't harass them. You can't interact with them. You stay away from them. They're protected species.
Exactly.
Oh shit! I didn't know that. I'm like, how is he? Why is he getting arrested? That's kind of funny. Yeah. I'm like, that's ballsy.
He's lucky he wasn't killed, but I don't know what size gator it was, so maybe it wasn't that big. But it's a stupid thing to do, and he deserves. It'll be a misdemeanor charge. Somebody like Ken will, hopefully get him to pay a fine or something like that. No, I don't mean that in a negative way. That's not pejorative. I mean, the defense attorney in Florida will take his case and they'll plea it out to a misdemeanor. And
it'll be pled out. He'll do some community service, probably attend an animal education program. No, I told you the story about my friend who had the alligator come on his diving board. I told you this story, right, guys?
No.
Oh.
I don't remember the diving board aspect of it. That's pretty...
diving board in their home?
Lives in Jupiter, Florida. He came home from work. He has a pool in his backyard. He came out, was about to go to swim. He sees this alligator resting on the diving board. So he calls the police.
It's a perfect place to sun.
Yeah.
He goes, there's an alligator in my backyard. And the cops goes, is the alligator attacking anyone? He said, no, it was just lying there. I said, great, call animal control. So he calls animal control. They ask him the same question. Is the alligator attacking him? He said, no, he's just laying on my diving board. He said, great, we'll be there in a couple of hours. Don't touch it and don't feed it. Apparently, the alligators are cold-blooded animals, and they like the diving board is most of them are
it's cool.
Are roughage, so it feels really good against their stomachs and has a lot of heat. So it heats up the alligators. They feel really good, like a massage. And because they're nocturnal, most alligators are nocturnal, they sleep during the day and they store up body heat during the day. So you don't want to annoy it. So the animal control came a couple hours later and, went in there, used the loop on the end of the stick around its mouth, duct taped its claws and its hand and its mouth, and they took it upstate and jumped off in the swamp.
Wow, that's
crazy. Don't touch it, and don't feed it.
Either they dropped it off in a swamp or they cooked it because you can't eat it.
Right. Steve Hook is in the chat on YouTube. What's going on, Steve Hook? He's actually going to be on the show July 11th. Steve Hook is running for city council at large. So he's going to be on this show. So big ups to Steve Hook. Actually, Steve, my man, our squared up here, Rob gave you props when I told him that you were actually the guy that led Brockton Emergency Management Systems here, BEMA, in Brockton. And he gave props to you. And this is coming from a guy, that you want to get props from. So good stuff, Steve. Also here in the sports booth, hey, it was media day. Kristapas Porzingis has signed with the Celtics. They traded away Marcus Smart. I agree with it. I'm a little upset we're losing Marcus Smart, but guess what? We got rid of a guy that likes to argue with refs and cost us some crucial calls. We got a guy that flops horribly and costs us calls. Porzingis is going to give us some height, and he can shoot from the perimeter. So I think I know a lot of people were upset that Marcus Smart, but it wasn't as loud because people know we're getting a good guy in Porzingis here on the Celtics, so we're interesting to see. Before we get into the Patriots signing Devante Parker, well, actually I will. Patriots signed Devante Parker to a 3-year deal, so he will remain here. But guess what? The Patriots still have room in the cap to sign DeAndre Hopkins and Dalvin Cook. So keep your eyes out for that one, people. Still some money under the cap. Also, Hard Knocks 2023, guys. What are your thoughts on this one? Hard Knocks, a lot of teams don't like to be on Hard Knocks. But guess what? The New York Jets have stepped up and have decided they're going to be on Hard Knocks this season. For those who don't know what Hard Knocks is, this is a reality TV show where they follow the entire team the whole season. And my feeling has been from day one that this signing of Aaron Rodgers is going to be the biggest disaster possibly in NFL history. And now we're going to see it on Hard Knocks. Your thoughts, guys? Because I'm going to tune in just to see the train wreck. I'm sorry. Ken?
Look, I'm generally have very low tolerance for what I like to call trash TV, which is what Hard Knocks is. Let's face it. You're calling in for the crap. Okay. Now I love football, I love professional football, I love the behind the scenes seat, but Hard Knocks is they're looking for the train wreck. But there's a part of me, and I hate to admit it exists. And it's like I know I shouldn't look at the traffic accidents. I know it's a gawker's block. I know I shouldn't do it. I should have paid attention to the road, but there's a part of me that can't resist looking at the accident. And that's the part of me that's probably going to tune in just for that. It's like, I'm ashamed. Hi, my name's Ken. I'm a train wreck addict.
R-Squared doesn't talk a lot about reality show either, but does this catch your interest, R-Squared?
Nope. Won't watch a minute of it.
Really? Ooh, so what? Looks like we'll be reporting on it for him. Here's the thing.
The train wreck that is the New York Jets will be visible on the field in just a few months, and we can all watch it for ourselves.
And guys, can you believe that we've already started camps as of this week? 2 a days this year. Unbelievable. Buy the Bombshells. Go ahead.
Hold on a second. Preseason, what? Second week in August?
September. Preseason September. And we're only 3 games now versus 4. So September. Well, no, August is your preseason. September, the season kicks off.
I'm saying preseason. Preseason is the second week in August.
Yes.
So that's 6 weeks away.
Yes, exactly. We're here. We're already here, Ken. Buy the Bombshells. There's a couple of things I tabled for the Biden Bombshells before we close out the show. It's at 8:05. We're going to just go a little bit over. I got to table this discussion. We had a nice little chat going on, and it was nice. It's nice to follow these guys because, I've got R-Squared, I got Ken. These guys are both, R-Squared was in the military. Ken's in law. And, when I talk to these guys in the chat, we still keep it professional. Rob has to remind us sometimes, hey, let's see what happens. Let's see. There's a lot of reports, and Rob's that guy that kind of reels us back in when something exciting happens. Last weekend, we had this Russian issue that happened that almost wasn't close to civil war, but it was a big issue, and we kind of was watching it in real time, and it really did get to some tense moments, and then on Sunday they wrapped it up. Prigozhin was exiled to Belarus. I asked R-Squared, how much did the Ogliaks pay him? My feeling is that this is Putin. He challenged Putin. It doesn't matter how long it takes or where he's exiled to. I feel like Putin is still going to get his for being made to look bad. As of today, Sergei Surovikin has been arrested over this mutiny by the Wagner Group because they're saying that he is the guy that supplied Prigozhin with information and where to come. As he had troops. His troops they weren't far from Moscow. They didn't make it there, but my question with these guys is, I know R-Squared to put some stuff in the chat as far as, his opinions on the military level. Let's talk about this hurting Putin and this whole thing and how it affects the Ukraine. I feel like I don't think it's going to affect the Ukraine overall, but I do think that, again, this is another black eye that's going to hurt Putin's legacy. I'm going to start with R-Squared because he's the military guy. And because he had to reel us in on this one because it was coming fast and furious, and it was a pretty interesting story at the end of this.
Yeah, look, I think it's more interesting and there's more intrigue to it than there's reality. There are 3 takeaways from it. Number 1, there's not a single life insurance company out there that will sell Prigozhin a policy. And so his days are numbered. I mean, we all know, right? Putin got rid of people in London. He got rid of people all over the world. They are good at this. And Prigozhin will wind up with some weird uranium poisoning in the months to come. And we'll all know, there may not be proof, but we'll all know how that happened and why. The other issue is what was interesting about Prigozhin, what makes this militarily interesting or politically interesting is there's only one reason that he marched towards Moscow and got as close as he did, and that's because he believed he had support when he got closer, and that support fell off. And so either Putin and the loyalists figured out who the support was and turned them back, or they willfully abandoned Prigozhin. And so as he got close enough to finally, make the commitment to go to Moscow and realized he didn't have the support, he had no choice but to turn around and go back because the support he needed to be able to do what he wanted. This was not, I just wanted to make a statement. No one believes that. This wasn't, I just wanted to make a statement. All right. When you march like that, you have an objective, and his objective was to defeat Putin or take Moscow with with obviously to get rid of Putin. And of course he realized he couldn't do it when he lost his support, and he did the best thing he could, which was to turn around and go back, come up with some silly story. And of course, I guess because of Lukashenko, he has a place to live in Belarus until he gets his uranium tea that he has to drink. And that's, so the takeaway is how close did Prigozhin really come? How much support did he think he had? How much of it did he really have? We may never know that. He clearly had some support. He clearly had some generals. He clearly had some elements of the Russian military waiting to support him in Moscow. And for what reasons that I would love to read about, I mean, an incredible source, not speculate, they didn't materialize for him. So, the long term, what does this do for Putin? Yeah, it's a little bit of a black eye. I don't know that it changes much. I mean, does he care about public opinion on the international world press? No, because he just arrests the journalists anyway. So, I don't know how much of this the Russian people are aware of. I don't know that Putin has given them a chance to do much about it, but it is interesting. I mean, it's something to pay attention to, but I don't think this is a consequential story going forward.
Yeah, I feel like that the fact that he didn't have that support is what killed this whole thing. Go ahead, Ken.
First of all, anyone who thinks Prigozhin did not have support from within the military security complex in Russia is either a liar, a Russian bot, or an idiot.
Yep.
The CIA apparently knew about this a week and a half ago.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, they're saying they were like, there's like, we know it's going down. He got inside of Russia. He was on the M4, which is the equivalent of I-95, and going up there hell-bent for leather, as we used to say back in Jersey back in the day, blowing through checkpoints like he was blowing past a Stady on 128 on Memorial Day weekend, and no one was batting an eye. Clearly, he had some support. How much, we can debate that. My personal opinion is I think he was told he had a lot more support than they did. Maybe they were just looking to get Prigozhin out of the way, and they figured this is a great way to have Prigozhin kill himself and maybe get rid of Putin and the benefit. But clearly he had support from the military. Clearly he figured out he didn't have as much as he needed. Although, frankly, I think it was a lot closer than we're led to believe. From what I'm listening from Telegram and other people on the ground, the Russians called out the tanks. They were digging ditches around Moscow. They were digging in. So there's no question that Putin was scared. I respectfully disagree with Colonel Resnick. I think this really wounds Putin with the only consistency that matters in Russia, and that is the oligarchs and the security state, the FSB, the military, the oligarchs. I think it makes him look incredibly weak. Remember, Prigozhin was Putin's bitch. Okay, he created him. And if you can't control him, that means you're weak. He's also, 74 years old? He ain't a spring chicken. And this isn't like the United States where we have 90-year-old men running for president. Putin's been sick for a while. The war in the Ukraine is going disastrously for everyone. I think this is more in line of the Gorbachev coup in 91. If you remember that coup failed. Coup against Gorbachev in 91 failed, but Gorbachev was out within 6 months because he lost the was expendable. And I think that's what you can have. We have an election coming up in March of 2024, and there's no question it's rigged. But I can very easily see that the FSB gives him the golden handshake, or in this case, the golden windowsill, or give him the old joke. You've heard the old mafia joke. You leave him by the door, the window, your choice. As for Mr. Prigozhin, all I can say is I would not, for all the tea in China, want to be that man's food taster.
Yeah. And you know what? I sped through the sports booth. I forgot to mention Conor McGregor's team is still winless on Tough. Karma's a bitch, Conor McGregor. Karma's a bitch. You stacked the team and you lost. My question here to close this out before we say goodbye, though, is to Rob, and this is in regards to the Wagner Group, which is a mercenary group, which is 30,000 troops being paid by Putin to do his dirty bidding. And, we've had these stories over history. We've seen the movies, and, movies are loosely based on some facts. And Rob's a military guy, and I got to ask him, what are your thoughts on this whole thing about guys who were ex-military and becoming, these private military groups for different countries? Let's be honest here. We've seen a whole group of retired U.S. servicemen go over and protect oil fields under, I think it was called Blackthorn, for Texas oil makers. And, those are almost kind of mercenaries. What are your thoughts on people who are trained and they retire and they go on and become these? And to be honest, militaries doing business with mercenaries, because we did business with mercenaries and it bit us in the ass because we helped Osama bin Laden as a group, and he came back and bit our ass years later and blew up the towers. So what are your thoughts as a military guy? I get it. Sometimes the dark work has to be done. And you have to do stuff with certain people. But what are your thoughts as a military guy?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, if you really want to look at a good breakdown of the challenges with these third-party militaries, mercenary groups, whatever, there's an amazing article by a professor named Yelena Bieberman. I think the article came out in the Atlantic Council, one of those publications. And I read it. I read it before it was published, and it's an excellent article, and I agree a lot with what she writes about in her conclusions. But to summarize some of the issues with that, first of all, people have a military career that ends in a couple of different ways. One is they leave under, after honorable service, whether they retire or choose to get out at some earlier point. They leave having done honorable service. They look for a follow-on career. Many of them may choose to go into security companies, international security companies, and some of them may choose to go into mercenary organizations. A lot of the people who go into mercenary organizations were not the ones that ended their careers honorably, as you can imagine. They're the ones who got kicked out for various reasons, who had psychological issues, who had disciplinary issues, who had issues that made them unfit for continued service. And so these mercenary groups, you don't necessarily know what percentage of people you're going to get. Many of them have experience, relevant experience, military experience and training. That's what makes them, sought after to hire them, to bring them in. But you don't always know what percentage. Now, when we talk about Wagner, we've talked about this on the show. I talked about it quite a bit on the show. Wagner is a criminal organization. They're not just a mercenary group. There are mercenary groups that act within the law. And we may not like it, or maybe we do like it, but they act within the law, and they're hired, they do their job, and what have you. But there are also mercenary groups, Wagner is the epitome of this, that are criminal organizations. They don't follow any legal code. They don't follow the Geneva Conventions. They don't follow any international law provisions. They don't. They do follow some of the provisions. They do fight under an insignia and in a uniform, but they don't follow the rules of conduct. In other words, they commit war crimes, they commit atrocities, and they do it intentionally as their strategy. The whole idea for Prigozhin, his alleged beef with Putin, was not that Putin wasn't doing a good job with the Ukraine war, although that's true. It was that Putin wasn't being brutal enough in the Ukraine war. Russia commits atrocities every day. They are illegally bombing cities, city apartment buildings and schools and hospitals, all of which are an abomination. They're severe war crimes. Putin needs to be brought on trial and executed for his war crimes. even the greatest defense attorneys like Ken could not defend Putin at a tribunal. There's the evidence against him is overwhelming. You would need about 10 Kens to have a chance, and he can't, because there will be one Resnick going up to prosecute him. So, but no, all kidding aside, Prigozhin wants Putin to be even more of a war criminal than he is. So let's not pretend that Prigozhin was some kind of good guy that we might like to see replace Putin. He would be worse than Putin. That's a tough thing to say, because I think Putin is as disgusting as it gets, but Prigozhin would be worse. So that's what Wagner is, right? Wagner is an international criminal organization that just happens to call itself a mercenary group. And of course, Putin is very happy to use them, because one of the things that this Ukraine war has exposed, some people doubted the capabilities of the Russian military, but not to this extent. Nobody predicted it to this extent, that's for sure. But they are incredibly incapable. They are not properly trained. They are desperate to recruit people. They're taking convicts, just the way we did in the Vietnam era. You can go to jail or you can go to war. And so you've got this very interesting national security challenge for Russia about the inability to train and equip a capable, I'm just going to say capable military force. They have some capabilities. They're clearly underperforming compared to what we thought they might do. Nobody thought they were as good as the United States. They're not as good as other countries, but they have numbers. And, with some recent experience, I guess a lot of their veterans maybe left, but you don't have that many people. Putin relied on the Chechens to help him against Prigozhin. He couldn't even raise Russian elite troops to do it. So the Russian military is a mess. So to go to Ken's point about earlier, that's the legacy that Putin has, is that he exposed the Russian military as incredibly weak and ineffective. That's his legacy, and that's what makes him look weak. And it's true. And if he hadn't invaded Ukraine, nobody would know it. But because he invaded Ukraine. Now, for people who say, "Oh, but Wagner, they did such a good job. They're like the Russian elite forces." No, they're not. Over 100 Wagner troops attacked a special forces platoon of U.S. special forces and got their asses kicked. A handful of U.S. special forces destroyed over 100 Wagner troops. So Wagner's not that much better than the Russian military, okay? So, and this was in Syria. If you remember, a few years ago, there was a firefight. But to answer your question, I'm sorry, I think I got a little bit off track here, and I apologize for that. But to answer your question, mercenary groups, if they follow the rules properly, then it's an unfortunate reality. I'm not a fan of it, but it's an unfortunate reality. If they're acting like criminal enterprises like Wagner, then there has to be better accountability in the world community about it. And so what happens if Ukraine, if this war ends, and Putin and Russian troops can be tried for war crimes, and should be. But what happens to Wagner? Do they disappear? Are they going to be in some other small, tiny corner of the world behind a rock? Who knows how we're going to get accountability over them. So I have a lot of concerns about the role that mercenary groups play. I'm not a fan of it. I don't believe that they're all criminal, but there's certainly a disposition in that regard.
And before I let Ken chime in here, Rob, is it possible if you could find a link to that woman's piece that she wrote and put it on the corridor?
I have a copy of it, so maybe I'll ask permission to do that.
Oh, okay, cool. Ken, you want to add on that?
No, just Rob once again was more eloquent than I could ever be. And also like to remind everyone, he is a man with over 20 years experience in the military. He was a JAG officer, and he lectured on the rules of war for many years. So I think you need to take his opinion, not only as he expressed, we did a very good job, but understand this is a man coming from a lot of authority.
Yeah. And I appreciate it. And I'm, like I said before, and I'll say it again, I'm blessed to have First Tuesdays with these two guys, especially after some of the stuff that's gone down about being talked about this show, which, shall remain nameless, because I think our credit for our show speaks for itself. One of the longest Brockton shows out here, and to be called a Fisher-Price unlicensed radio show really stirred me up and got.
Who said that?
Oh, you haven't been on my Facebook page, Ken?
I have missed that.
I don't even want to get into it, but yes, the booth was
Fisher-Price unlicensed radio show.
because I did the show from a location. Because I did the show from location, I was told that my show is an illegal radio show without an FCC license because this person does not know what a podcast is and doesn't realize that we don't fall into FCC. We are an internet show and don't fall under FCC regulations. He called this show a Fisher Price show, and I should go back to eating fried chicken and watermelon.
No!
Good
God! Not funny. Not okay.
Oh God!
So yes,
so
the whole thing is on my.
And a racist. Okay.
He's running for mayor, Ken. He's running for the mayor of Brockton, and it's not even worth mentioning the name. But people have been following my Facebook page. Yeah.
Okay, we know who he is, but well.
So it is what it is. If I'm going to mention any mayors today, it's rest in peace, Bill Carpenter, 4-year anniversary of his passing, one of the best mayors here in the city of Brockton. Whether you agreed or disagree with Mayor Carpenter, one thing is damn sure, that he loved this city. He wanted the best for this city. We're still seeing things being done in this city that were a result of him becoming mayor. Now, as we get ready to get out of here, let me pull up my outro banners for the show. Thank you for everybody supporting the show with things that they purchase. Also, thank you to all the shows that I podcast, that I produce, and add in Fubar Studios, Veteran Reinforcement. This is Doug Macito's show. I'm happy to say that I am doing that. And big ups to Travis Partington, Oscar Mike Radio. We just landed another big one. The United States Postal Service is having a promotion with scamming vets. They're trying to alert people about vets being scammed, and they've come to Oscar Mike Radio to help them with their promotion of this thing for veterans. So not only we are being brought on the VA hospitals website, we are now going to be part of the United States Postal Service website to help veterans. And tomorrow's July 4th. Just got to go over this list again for you guys that I just put up. The reasons for calling 911 on the 4th of July. Don't call 911 if people are setting off fireworks. Number 2, if firework debris is landing in your yard, don't call 911. If your wife is upset and can't sleep, don't call 911. If your cat is upset and hiding, don't call 911. The reasons to call 911 tomorrow is if your idiot neighbors set their house on fire, lighting off fireworks, you call 911. If there are body parts landing in your yard after a fireworks explosion, you need to call 911. And if your wife isn't waking up, call 911. And if your cat starts shooting back, call 911. And if you guys were watching the show before we came on, remember Alex Kittner, Memoriam? That was Alex Kittner, is the kid who was eaten in Jaws on July 4th weekend. Remember when Chief Brody was told, the beaches have to be open? Till this day, the mayor of that beach goes down in history as probably one of the worst villains in movie history. But people don't say that. But he is. He's the worst. He has Kittner's blood on his hands. If it wasn't for him forcing Chief Brody to open the beaches, Alex Kittner would be live today. Brockton After Dark, July 5th it begins. Also, Soul Abundance with Lisa Z, July 12th in Plymouth. July 14th, Vianna Marie is hosting the Little Easy-E Drippy J show on July 14th. She also has an event on the 15th, which is a battle, which is going to take place in Boston. Also, July 14th and 15th in Indianapolis, Savannah Strong. I'm trying to get these people on the show. Their daughter passed away after carbon monoxide poisoning. So they do these events all over the country. Hashtag Savannah Strong. And also, my Slingshot event takes place July 28th. I'll be able to drive. I got to give a big shout out to Mr. Chapman, who did the surgery on my knee last week. Great stuff. I'm able to get up and down out of chairs. Good stuff. 29th Cape Verdean Day Festival, Sunday, July 30th, 2023, 2 to 8 p.m. at the Arnones Field. Rain date is August 6th. And everybody's in the chat about this whole thing about the mayor, the guy who's running for mayor who's on my Facebook. Vianna Marie, Empowerment, Kimberly Ann Photography. And I got to let my guys say their goodbyes before we head into...
Well, see you next Tuesday.
Hold on here. I don't want to do that yet. I got to let my guys say their goodbyes. I'm going to start with R Square because he's got We the People behind him. Let him know.
Yeah, obviously July 4th is about the Declaration of Independence. I have the Constitution behind me, but nevertheless, what we celebrate is not just the birth of the United States of America. We celebrate the birth of what I hope still is a great example of democracy in action, even though we have to work to keep it. So let's celebrate the 4th, let's celebrate democracy, and let's remember that it's always going to be something we have to fight to keep.
Ken Diesel?
Want to thank all of our listeners, all 12 of you. Want to echo what Rob said. Let's remember we're fighting to keep our democracy, imperfect as it is. And everyone out there, be safe, enjoy. Remember what my grandfather said, everything in moderation is always good. We'll see you next month.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning into the show. It is 8:30. Going to get ready to get out of here and let SpongeBob take us home. Everybody, please, please, please have a safe 4th of July, and we'll see you next week on the booth. SpongeBob, take us home.
Well, see you next Tuesday.
Thank you for listening to The Booth on Hoobazoo and HatcherRadio.com. Please follow the Facebook page and subscribe to the podcast at Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. The Booth is a Sinister One production hosted by Sinister One.
I've got to start hanging out with friends that are a little more intelligent and understand politics and stuff. It's just that I'm up on this level up here, and all my friends are down here. Me, nah. You guys, nah. Maybe a little more down in here. Screw you guys, I'm going home.
I smoke, I drink, I do my thing. These bitches hating, so you know I got to make it plain. Don't do cocaine with your chick, my main. We stick together, true forever, yeah, you know we bang. I miss those days, which was easy. If only I make it, this don't repeat. Now that I done upgraded, I've been upstate, and y'all think I'm playing. And I got a hit now for these weak ass hoes who think I ain't slaying. Try me, and I'll probably end up laughing, cause I never back down. I'm that chick with a clean ass whip, I don't need that shit, I got my own now. I get hurt, I get tired of fussing, fighting, guess I gotta crack down. Don't mess with me, cause on everything, I'ma have to bring the whole city out.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website.